Okay. All right. So today on Serial Killer Whisperer with Laura Brand, Laura Brand is MIA right now. We don't know where she is. So we're trying to get a hold of her. And so she'll probably join us when she does. Hope everything is well with her. But I know she was going up to
a secret
location and she might not have internet. But we're going to start with our special guest today, Gil Carrillo. And for people who know anything about LA homicide detectives and the Night Stalker, Gil's name comes up repeatedly because he was the homicide detective on the case. And it's that. First of all, Gil, thanks for taking the time your Sunday to speak with us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. So what I'd love to do is just kind of just give us a little bit, like a short bio on yourself, and tell us a little bit how you got roped into the Night Stalker case, and then we'll kind of go into we're not going to get into the graphic details, but just the case is pretty interesting, and this guy is, Richard Ramirez is, the more and more I read about his background and how he grew up and all that stuff is pretty crazy. It was almost like he was groomed to be a serial killer.
Well, I don't know where to start. Geez, I can tell you, I was 17 years old. A cop took me home and told my parents to sign for me to get off the streets or I'll end up dead or in prison. I was no good. I was a hood rat and I was headed nowhere. They signed. I went into the Army, ended up in a place called Vietnam, come back. I had a whole new outlook on life, new appreciation on life. I wanted to go to college. None of my siblings or any relative for that matter had ever gone to college in my family. I had 6 sisters, and they had to let me in because I was a Vietnam vet, and I knew I was mature because I sent for my high school transcripts, and I obviously thought when I was in school, D stood for damn good and F was fabulous. I got in, and all I wanted to do was go to college. I wanted to become a cop to give somebody a second chance at life like that cop had saved my life. And so I joined the sheriff's department. I wanted to start hooking up with my ex-girlfriend who wrote me a Dear John when I was in Vietnam. And I wanted to get her eaten out of the palm of my hand so I could break it off with her and watch her suffer like I did. I wanted revenge. And I got out in June of 70. By September of 70, I had her eaten out of the palm of my hand. The day after Christmas, 1970, booyah, we got married. And
so your plan failed.
Well, it's not over with yet. I just
you're in the long game.
Yeah, this December will be 54 years, and I remind her that I'm still working on number 3. And so, and I stopped. It's been great. Got onto the sheriff's department after working a couple of years in the jail. I went out to East LA Patrol, which is at that time, in the early 70s, was the gang capital of the world. I was a natural to start working gang units over there because of my upbringing, and I knew how to talk to them and I knew how they acted. So things went well. And then March 23rd of 81, it normally takes in Sheriff's Homicide Bureau minimum 15 years to get up there. And I had a little less than 10 years on the department, and they called me up and they asked me to go work with them. They had just started a unit that focused on gang murders, and they wanted me up there. So I got to go up, and it was a marriage made in heaven. March 23rd of 1981. Made it easy because that's my wife's birthday. Made it easy to not forget her birthday because that was a day in homicide. That was a big day for me. And I worked there for 21 years as an investigator. I then left on loan to go work for the sheriff for a while, doing some stuff. And when I went back to homicide,
what sheriff did you end up working with?
I ended up working with Lee Baca.
Lee, yeah, I know Lee.
Yeah, and Lee was a good man. He was good to me. A lot of the guys didn't. He was different, right? But he had a good heart, and so I went to work with him. It was an ideal job. I would go out to the individual units we had. I'd spend 2-3 days there, ask a bunch of questions. What are the problems out here? What are your concerns? I'd write them up anonymously on their behalf, and then the sheriff would go out there 2 weeks later with me, and he'd address these questions. We were taking care of problems on the department, and they were loving it, so things went well. Made lieutenant from there, and they said, we're going to sit. Normally, when you make lieutenant, you go out to either custody or you go out to a patrol division. But they sent me right back to Homicide Bureau. They said, you're a round peg in a round hole. You've asked to go back to patrol, but really, what are you going to do for us in patrol? You haven't been in a radio car in 20 years. They need your experience back at Homicide. So that's when I went back to Homicide and spent my last 5 years supervising 14 homicide investigators for my team. And it was great. I loved it. It was a great job. During that time, while I was there on March the 17th of 1985, I happened to be on call that night. And just to prove that I was bad to my mother as a child, I got the first case, what later turned out to be this Night Stalker series. And it was something to be remembered. The very first victim we had, the deceased on that one, was Dale Okazaki, and her roommate, who was shot in the hand and survived, was Maria Hernandez. And what a small world. They rolled Maria to the hospital. She got shot in the hand and was able to get away. While I'm in there, I was silhouetted inside this apartment, this condo, and outside it was dark. Inside it was well lit, and deputy comes up, a patrol cop comes up, he says, "Hey, Gil," he says, "mother of your victim wants to talk to you if you have a minute." And I said, "Okay, tell her, just give me 2 minutes max. Let me finish taking these measurements here, and I'll stop what I'm doing and go out and talk to her." And all of a sudden I hear this voice saying, "Gilbert, is that you?" And I'm sitting to myself saying, "Hey, wait a minute, I'm Gil. I'm too cool to be called Gilbert anymore. That was my name when I was a kid." And I said, "Yes, I'm sorry, I can't see you. Who's this?" She goes, "It's me, Pauline." And I just heard the voice, Pauline. I said, "Pumpkin, is that you?" And she said, "Yes." Well, Pumpkin grew up 3 houses down from my house. I mean, she was married. She had Maria Hernandez as a daughter. My parents became the godparents to Maria Hernandez.
Wow.
Oh my God. These things are incredible. We've heard so many of these things. It's incredible.
Sure. And I hadn't seen Maria since she was about 6 months old because her mom and dad got divorced and they moved away. Well, she remarried to someone else, and this is the first time I'd ever seen Maria, and that's what started. That was the first case of the modern series, and then it was hell. It was a tough case for me to work. It was tough on anybody because this guy his only consistency was his inconsistency.
Yeah,
he used shod foot knives, guns, different calibers, blunt force trauma manual, and ligature strangulation. Some he had sex with, some he didn't. Victims range in age from 5 years old all the way up to 85.
Yeah.
So he was just at that time, Quantico was saying these profiling was relatively new, that serial killers were either organized or disorganized, and organized always had the tools of their trade with them. They'd go inside and take their own weapons with them. Disorganized would be opportunists, guys who went in there and used tools for their murderous activity from inside the residence. Well, Richard did both, and the time of day, everything was so different. And I owe everything to a college professor that I took 2 semesters from at Cal State LA, Dr. Robert Morneau, or as I called him, Bob. He was a retired FBI agent. He was a male chauvinist. And when I started going to Cal State LA, I had to go to him to ask permission to get into the criminal justice courses. And he said, "Yeah." And I was wearing a turquoise wrist watch band and turquoise rings. And he said, "First off, where'd you get that stuff from?" And I said, "Well, my cousins, He says, "Where at?" And I said, "Gallup, New Mexico." He says, "Ah." He says, "Where's the best chili in the world come from?" I said, "Hatch, New Mexico, Hatch Green." And he turns around, he says, "I've been trying to tell these bitches back here this for years, and they won't listen to me." That's the kind of guy. He was just a fun guy.
Mm-hmm.
He gave me all the knowledge to identify things in this case that unless you had sex crimes investigation, you wouldn't see. So when you're talking about, I went to Homicide Bureau. I was the youngest guy in the bureau for probably my first 7 years there. The average age was up around 50 years of age. And I went up there, I was only 31, 32 years old. And there, people didn't believe in me. And I heard a lot of stuff, I was a young punk Mexican trying to make a name for myself because I was trying to sell the fact that it was one serial killer. And not only was he killing adults, he was kidnapping kids. And nobody in criminal history had ever been documented doing what he was doing. And to this day, there still hasn't been anybody documented doing what he was doing.
No, not that I know of.
And so it was a long, hard road. And not until really much further on in the case when Frank and I started working together and we were finally able to put together some stuff that looked like it was one man. And then we finally got physical evidence to show that it was one guy. And so
Good.
What were you able to kind of put together to decide that it was one man? Because I mean, he was terrifying. I was a child when I first came to LA with my parents. My dad was working in LA. And I remember hearing these stories about this Night Stalker. And it just was like this monster that was shadowing over Los Angeles. It was terrifying. And
I'm sorry.
No, you finish. You go ahead.
Early on, in what we had the kids that were giving him physical description. And the physical description was matching that of the adult description. His clothing, stained gap teeth, pungent odor, disheveled hair, and he left a shoe print. He was dressed in all black clothing and wore members only type jacket. And he left a shoe print, the shoe print of the Avia Model 440. And it was size 11.5, 12. And that shoe, I can tell you without equivocation today, January 9th, 1985, 1,356 pair of Model 440s entered New York from Taiwan for distribution, of which 6 pair ended up in the state of California and 1 pair ended up in LA. And they were the black shoes. So you had,
and that was a new brand of shoe too, I believe.
It was a brand new Avia. The guy that had the patent on it was an Oregon track coach. I want to say his name was Jerry Stubblefield, if my memory serves me correct. And he had the patent on it. Had it been a Reebok or any other kind of shoe, a Nike, we'd have been lost. But that was a brand new shoe. And when you have those things together, we had some ballistics, but we couldn't match the ballistics because the bullets were destroyed. We could say they were from the same caliber gun. And then when we started finding casings, and then in the end, when we finally found them guns, we could say that the casings had been run through the mechanism of this weapon or that weapon. And that's what brought it all together.
Wow. Yeah. And I remember that whole thing when, that was your key piece of evidence that you kind of realized that it was one person. And then someone put it out in the press about it, and then tell us if correct me if I'm wrong, but up in San Francisco, Dianne Feinstein got involved and kind of threw a monkey wrench in it for you.
Oh, she sure did. Talked to Richard later. He threw the shoes over the Golden Gate Bridge after she said what she did.
Yeah. And, so basically, she came out publicly with that information, and it went to the press. And I'm sure it made your head boil because it was like a key piece of evidence. And you're like, why would you do that? And then tell us what he did.
Well, he went up to San Francisco, committed another crime up there, another murder of Mr. Peter Pan. His last name was Pan. It was an Asian couple. And that was the first time he left a pentagram carved into a sliding closet door. And up there, we went up there to go see what was going on. We flew up there and we gave the homicide cops from San Francisco a copy of a flyer that we made sure this is for law enforcement only. And it had the caliber of gun, the shoe that we were looking for, a car that we were looking at. And that paper made it to the hands of Mayor Feinstein, and she had a press conference and put it out. And we had just landed. We were going into our office when our media section saw us walking in. They said, "Hey, Gil and Frank, come here, look at this." And she's putting it out, and we were livid. I went I went batshit, and I just told Frank, I said, "Screw this place. Let's go. Let's go have a drink. May as well go fishing." And we went down there. We found our captain. Told the captain what was going on. Told him what had happened. And we said, "You need to talk to Sheriff Block, who was a powerful. Not only was he a good boss, but he was a politically powerful man down here in LA County."
Yeah, I remember Block. Yeah.
And so Block said, "All right." He left. And Frank and I remained there having some drinks. And we got a call about a half hour later, and he said, "Stop drinking, get some dinner, and come back here at 8 o'clock." We went back there. He had called a press conference that night and let him know in no uncertain terms for politicians to stay out of our murder.
Good.
Information had been released that could be very costly to the investigation. And he told them off air when he called up there, "And you tell her if she doesn't shut her trap, we're going to embarrass her." So he took care of that problem. And when it was done, he just said, "Well, how did we do?" And my response to him was, you just put smiles on the faces of two tired and weary investigators. We're ready to go home and come back and hit it again tomorrow. And so that was a big help for us.
Because Dianne Feinstein was the mayor of San Francisco at the time, and she put out the information about the shoes. So then Ramirez took the shoes and dumped them over the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yes.
So basically putting a huge
as well as a
wrench
gun.
and the gun. So
And
why would she do something like that? That's so ridiculous.
I never got the chance to personally ask her.
Oh my God. It's must be so frustrating working in your position for as many years.
Sometimes it is. And Laurel Erickson, who was a reporter, she went up to San Francisco. She was on the same plane when we went up, and she was on the same plane that we came back on. And she was a pain, but we became the best of friends. And she was good at what she did. She really was. And then we were having a very candid conversation one time. Sometimes I got to play the dumb blonde. Sometimes I got to bat my eyes. Sometimes I got to blow up their egos and let them know because we're after something. She had the information on the shoe print. I wanted to arrest her at one time for extortion. She had the information on a shoe print because she went to a house that we had served a search warrant on. And the homeowner showed her the search warrant. The search warrant laid out these shoes that we're looking for. So she called up the next day and she was talking to Frank, telling Frank, "If you won't give me a story, I'm going to go with the shoe print." And he said, "Hold on," gave the phone, called the captain and said, "Hey, I got this broad on the phone and she wants to do this." So he talked to her. Captain came out and said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do. You are not to leave this office until I give you permission to leave. She's going to come set up down in the parking lot. She's going to get a grab shot. She's going to grab you. She'll be able to ask you a question while you guys are on your way out to your cars and leaving." So that's what we did. And she stood up. She never mentioned the shoe print. Paul Skolnick, who was her producer at the time, I spoke to him when they were filming the documentary for Netflix. Mm-hmm. And he said, that was just Laurel being Laurel. She never would have given up that information. That was never the intent. So she got what she wanted.
Yeah, of course. You if she had given it up, she would have lost you guys forever.
Yeah.
Right? That's the thing.
So it was, we ended up becoming friends, and we went out to dinner, and she just said, "Gil should have been a politician. When we have something," we talked to Frank because Frank had worked on the Hillside Strangler. He says, "When Frank's got something to say, he talks to us. If he's got nothing to say, he won't give us the time of day. Gil will talk to us if he's got something to say. If he's got nothing to say, he'll talk to us about everything else in the world except for the case he's working on. He's just a nice guy." And we ended up being friends.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So for that case up in San Francisco with the pentagrams and stuff like that, was that the first time you saw some of the satanic symbols that were left at the scene, or was he doing that beforehand?
He left one on a wall in Monrovia. we had one of our other investigators handle that case. They went out on the case because we didn't know initially that was related. They went out on the case, and then, so we saw it later in a photograph that they had used lipstick to not only put it on the wall, but he put it on her leg. And that was the first time we knew it. And this guy I didn't know squat about the pentagram. I didn't know anything about it until this case and started learning a little bit more. Matter of fact, I asked Rich about it. And one time when we were conducting an interview with him, he was sitting across the table from me at the desk, and with his finger, he's making a circle, just going round and round. And I looked at him, and I never took my eyes off him. I said, "Go ahead and fill it in, Rich." He said, "What do you mean fill it in?" I said, "Go ahead and put the pentagram in there." He says, "You know about that stuff?" I said, "Yeah." "It doesn't bother me. It doesn't frighten me. It doesn't concern me." And he stopped, and then he erased his magic circle that he had started. He just forgot about it, and we talked about it later. He just, I didn't know what it was, and I really didn't care, because the bottom line, I guess, when I've spoken all over the place, one of the biggest questions asked, especially by younger people, wasn't I afraid going into the room with him, knowing that he was into devil worship and he was a serial killer and he was bad? And my answer was absolutely not. He was nothing more than another human being. When you go in, it's game time. You get any quarterback in the National Football League, and during the week, they're nothing but a buddy, a father, a brother, a dad, a husband, and they go drinking with their buddies, and then on Sunday put the helmet on, and now it's game time. So you wipe everything else out of your mind except for that game. Well, going into that room, you wipe everything else out except for what you got to do. And my job then was trying to get him to talk.
Yeah. So when you did talk to him, and you called him out on his little devil worshiping thing, do you think that was just kind of an act to kind of create more fear in his crime scenes?
No, he was really into Satanism, but Satanism is nothing more. I tell people, just another form of religion. I mean, you see a baseball batter go up to the plate making the sign of cross, and nobody gets worried.
Yeah.
So he just depended on that. I told him one time, I said, "Man, you should learn how to play both sides of the fence, Rich." He'd call me Gil, and I'd call him Rich. And I said, "Learn to play both sides of the fence." I go out, get in trouble, and run around. And I said, and on the way home, I'm saying, "Dear God, just get me home this time. I'll do the next one on my own." And he says, "No, I couldn't do that. I could not do that. Satan, Lucifer, would kick my ass if I did that when I went go to hell."
So he was a devout believer.
Yeah, he was. And we found a buddy of his before we identified Richard, and the buddy said that he ran around with these people. He liked them, like cocaine, and he said that he liked Asian women, and he used to lust after Asian women, and they had better booty. And when I say booty, I mean stuff for him to steal. He would steal all this stuff. And in his mind, he felt that since they were Asian, the cops really didn't care about them, and we wouldn't work the case that hard. And of course, that turned out not to be the truth. And just told him, "Hey, don't you watch television? The guys in the white hats always win."
Exactly. So do you think that was his main motivation for the killing, was to steal? Or is that just an afterthought, just like a bonus?
And you won't get a straight answer from three people in the same room won't give you the same answer. In my opinion, based on what I learned from Dr. Monroe after 2 semesters with him, I think he was a sexual deviant that went in there to satisfy his own sexual needs. And while I'm in here, while I'm done, okay, now I'll steal. There's something to be had. And he'd take it down. We found the fence he was using, and we recovered a bunch of stuff from the fence. And but I think sex was his main reason for doing it. He asked me one time, he said, "Hey, Gil, why do you think I am like this?" And I just said, "Rich, I don't know. If I knew that, I'd be a doctor making a lot more money than I am as a cop. I don't give a shit why you are the way you are. My job is to gather the facts and make a presentation to the DA and help prosecute you. And we're going to beat you. We got you, Rich."
How did you get him?
We actually identified him. He had hit down in Orange County, down in Mission Viejo. And on that car, the car that he used out there was recovered in downtown LA area. So that car was recovered. He left a partial print inside the car. So at that time, this is 1985, prints were not only convicted felons were automated. Misdemeanor convictions were not. And so we got the print, we sent it up to the Department of Justice. Well, at the same time, San Francisco PD had got this guy named Armando, and I want to say his last name was Rodriguez. He was a friend of Richard's up in San Francisco. That's who we used to go visit. And they got the last name from him, and they gave it to DOJ. So now they know we're looking for a Richard Ramirez. The informant told us that Richard had been arrested a year before for grand theft auto. So we told DOJ, hand search it, and they came up with 8 of them, and they matched one of them to the print that they had pulled out of the Orange County vehicle. That gave us a booking photo. The booking photo was of his arrest when he got arrested for grand theft auto the year before in 84. So that's how we made him. We showed the booking photo probably about 2-3 o'clock on Friday, August 30th. And he said, that's him. And that was his buddy. And we ran off thousands of those pictures to get him out as quick as we could to all cops in LA County, anywhere we could. Decision was made that evening. They got, I want to say the chief's name in San Francisco was MacArthur or McCarthy. Sherman Block down here, they had Daryl Gates for LAPD and Brad Gates from Orange County. Well, Brad, Daryl, and Sherman met in Sherman's office, and they gave a conference call up to San Francisco to decide if they were going to release Richard's name publicly. And so the captain came to us before they went to the meeting, and he said, okay, they're calling me down. They're talking about they want to release Richard's name. And what do you guys think? And just told him, give us 24 hours and we'll have him. And he said, okay. He went down, he came back up, and he said, we lose. They're going to release it tonight. And I understand. I said, if his name gets out, he sees it, then the chase is on. Right now, he doesn't know that we know who he is, and we'll have him 24 hours. And he just came back and said, we lost. They're going to release it. And I understood totally why. Had he killed somebody that night, and we knew who it was,
Yeah.
and we hadn't released it, woe be it. It's our fault.
Yeah.
Politicians would have.
Wasn't he out of town when you released it?
He was on his way back. He had been stopped on Wednesday. Prior to that Saturday, just 3 days before, he was on a motorcycle and he got cited in downtown LA by LAPD, and for not having a license, unlicensed motorcycle driver, and they patted him down. And he told me about the stop. He said there was 2 cops in a patrol car. He says they stopped him, they pulled him over, they patted him down. He says, and Gil, you got to tell them to be careful. He says, they missed a gun that I had in my crotch. He says, and one cop that's on the sidewalk, he's talking to people as they're walking by. The other cop is writing the ticket. I could have shot either one of them. And they gave him his ticket. He got on the bike. He took off. Tried going to Arizona. He had a brother that was living in Phoenix. The bike broke down. He got a trucker to stop. Says, you can have the bike. Just give me a ride on into Phoenix. That's what he did. Couldn't find his brother because his brother wasn't home. He jumped on a Greyhound bus and came back. We knew that the Greyhound bus depot was his, that was like home to him. That's where he kept what we called his kill kit. He had a locker there. The clothes he used when he'd go caper were inside a duffel bag, and along with bullets and guns. And so we knew that's where he hung around at. And so we had undercover cops all around the place, inside the place with brooms, and the informant told us, he says, hey, he's going to make you right away because you guys can look like you're street people, but you don't smell, you don't have rotten teeth, your hair is not dirty. He says he'll make you right away. Well, he comes back Saturday morning on a Greyhound bus coming in from out of town. So they pull in the back parking lot to let everybody out to go in through the lobby. Well, when he gets there and starts going in, he looks, he says, this ain't right. He went out that same door, walked out the way the bus comes in, got away, went down to a liquor store, saw his picture on the paper, got on the local bus, tried to make it. He had another brother that lived 8 miles east of downtown Los Angeles. And if he can get there, he's got a good jump on things. But he got made while he was on the bus, and then the chase was on.
Yeah.
And
Didn't some civilians chase him too?
well, what happened was a bus passenger was looking at the morning paper, saw him, saw the paper, and immediately he was already at a red light. He just pulled the cord. They opened the door, and the passenger got off. Before the bus took off again, Richard could see him dialing the
Payphone.
at the phone. Yeah. And so the bus takes off. Richard flags down a gas company pickup truck and says, follow that bus. The killer's on there. He goes about another mile on the bus, gets off the bus, then he starts running. And he runs through a housing project. He goes over the 10-foot sound walls of the 5 freeway, across all the lanes of the 5 freeway, going in backyards, jumping fences, going northeast. And by this time, 911 calls are coming from families that are saying, hey, there's some guy running over here. He gets to the county line, which is just a street, the yellow dividing line, and crosses into the county. He tries to carjack a car. He doesn't get away with it. He wrecks it right into a wall right there. He then gets out, runs down about a half a block down Hubbard Street, sees a lady, tries carjacking her. She starts screaming. Her husband came out with a piece of pipe and starts fighting with Richard, hit him in the head a couple of times. The neighbors they heard the screams. They saw their neighbor fighting this guy. They come out. Now they're going to get him. Richard starts running. He only gets about 3 or 4 houses. He's tired. He's been running and jumping fences, and he finally just gives up. And they just encircle him and wait for the cops to come pick him up. They didn't beat him up like people thought. They kept saying, "Oh, these guys beat him down."
Yeah.
They didn't beat him down. He was already beat down.
Yeah. That's fantastic. That's crazy.
How many victims did he actually take their lives?
We actually filed 14 counts of murder. During the beginning of the trial, there was one case, Patty Elaine Higgins, that the district attorney decided to sever because they had filed a motion to sever that one case, because that was the only one where we didn't have any physical or eyewitness. It was a circumstantial case, very tightly connected to the other cases in Arcadia, but there wasn't the footprint. There wasn't any, back then we didn't have DNA. There were no fingerprints, but we had enough. And the defense team wanted to sever the case. We want to go on that one. So the judge said, he told the district deputy DA, we're going to hear the motion to sever the case. And he says, however, I'm warning both sides that if I decide to grant their motion, then you must be ready to start the case tomorrow. And if I deny their motion, he told the defense team, you have to be prepared to start on the remaining 13, on the remaining cases. So everybody agreed. They came in the next day, and the judge looked at the prosecutor and said, hey, okay, I'm getting ready. I'm getting ready to grant their motion. And he says, Your Honor, you don't have to do that. He says, in the interest of justice, we will dismiss that case. So they dismissed that one murder on Patty Lane Higgins, and we are now ready to proceed on the remaining 13. And the judge said, okay, that one's dismissed, and we're ready to go on and the defense attorneys they had a heart attack because they really weren't prepared. They said, Your Honor, we're not really prepared. He says, I told you, be ready. So it's now, 9:30 in the morning. First witness goes on at 1:30 this afternoon after lunch. And
Right.
That's what we did. And so we dismissed her, went with the other ones, and we convicted them on everything that was filed against them.
Yeah. When you, but I mean, with all these serial killers, what we've found is that the ones you discover, their victims, there's usually a lot more. Do you believe that there were a lot more people that you knew about?
I don't think there was a lot more. Richard told us that there were 4 more that we didn't know about. And what Richard didn't know is we had looked at 8 of them. 8 more. And however, none of them had the cases were not strong enough to proceed against him. And we didn't want to put on a weak case because if he beat us on one, that might make the jury think that he could beat us on other ones. And we didn't want to screw up our case. And he says, give me about 7 years in custody. He says, and I'll tell you about the other 4 that you don't know about. So that's what
That's interesting. Why did he say that? Why did he say that?
I have no idea.
Did he think maybe 7 years is a good enough time to wait to see if he can appeal the stuff that he was convicted of?
I have no idea. I just listened to him, talked to him, kept dialogue open. He asked us at that time also, come execution day, Frank, would you be willing? Are you going to go up and watch me be executed? Frank's response was, "You're damn right I am." And he said, "Gil, what about you?" I said, "I don't know, Rich. I've been through combat and I've been on the streets here. I've seen enough death. That doesn't turn me on. If you want me there, I'll be there. If not, I'm not going to waste my time to go up there and watch him kill you." And he said, "No, I'd like you there." I said, "Okay, I'll be there." And that was it. We didn't talk about much. And he said he talked to me after 7 years. Phil Carlo, who's the guy that wrote a book on the Night Stalker case, he kept in touch with Richard and, in fact, was a witness to Richard's marriage when he got married and up there. And Phil had contacted me some years later and said, "Okay, Richard said he's ready to talk to you." And I said, "Okay, will you just get a message back to Rich? Tell him that as long as he's not going to bullshit me, I'll take the time to go up there and talk to him. If he's going to start playing games, I don't have time for it." Because the realities are, for me to go up and visit him, it's like a trip to Disneyland for him.
Yeah.
He's on death row.
You're candy. You're like candy.
Yeah. And so then he decided to get married to Doreen. And Doreen, the news media contacted me and said, "What did I think?" And I told him that I thought it was a mockery of the criminal justice system because he was not sent there for rehabilitation. He was sentenced to death. I didn't understand why we had to grant him the right, why he had the right to get married in there. And I said, and it's a mockery to the sacrament of marriage. I said, he will never be able to consummate that marriage. And why? I didn't understand why. And I thought it was a mockery of all of Christianity. And so he knew, it got back to him. He knew what I'd said and heard about it, and then didn't want to talk to me anymore.
Yeah.
And and in hindsight, I wish I wouldn't have said anything because I would have loved to have talked to him some more.
Yeah. How many times did you talk to him after the arrest?
Probably about 4 times. He got pretty candid. The guy's really an articulate guy and probably one of the sharper murderers I've ever interviewed. And he sits there, his word, one day we were talking and he says, "Hey, I got an ego that'll fill this room. I can tell you everything about the time the lions or the Romans fed the Christians to the lions to modern day serial killers." He knew all about my partner, Frank Salerno, and working on the Hillside Strangler. He was well read and he was articulate. So,
yeah. Did you ever test his IQ?
No, I never did. And
no, I'm just saying anybody.
The judge ordered a doctor to go interview him, and Rich only lasted about 30 minutes in the interview before we threw the doctor out. He didn't want people to think that he was crazy. He wanted people to know that he did what he did because he wanted to do it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because when I started diving into his past and his childhood, he, like most of these guys, there's a few serial killers that, you don't know why they did it because they had a decent childhood or anything, but a lot of them have pretty screwed up backgrounds. And it sounded like he had a pretty screwed up background. And the one thing I thought was really interesting is with his relationship with his cousin. I think his cousin Mike, who was a Vietnam vet and Green Beret who came back from Vietnam and actually, unfortunately, kind of taught him a lot of the stuff that he did over in Vietnam, as far as how to be stealthy and how to do stuff like that, and kind of revered a lot of the killings that he did over there. to Richard, which, you know, he was a young kid at the time, and I'm sure he looked up to this guy. And obviously, Vietnam. I mean, you're a veteran. You saw a lot over there. You know, it destroyed a lot of people's brains over there. You know, they came back broken.
I understand that, but to me, it sounds like he was just dancing with the devil.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how bad is. Yeah, you talk to guys, some of these people that have been turned out to be no good, and yeah, they were victims of child abuse. Richard told us that his dad used to beat him and beat him with a hose once in a while. And in order to get away from his dad, he'd go sleep in the cemetery. And I just sit there and say, God damn, you know, didn't that bother you? No, it was comfortable, it was peaceful, and okay, well, he did. He got involved with Satanism because of the dope. You know, and that's when he first started hanging around with those guys out here.
Yeah, and the LSD, did a lot of LSD apparently at a young age. And the one thing I thought about the cemetery, though, what I thought was crazy, and I don't even know if it's true, that is, you know, in addition to him sleeping in the cemetery, his father put him on a crucifix. Is that true?
I have no idea. You know, that's one that I hadn't heard. And all the other stuff about his Uncle Mike and, you know, the murder, and he witnessed his, that all came from Phil Carlo, the author of the book.
Got it.
I never vetted any of it. I didn't care.
Yeah.
You know, because people mistaken, you know, well, didn't you care about how he got there and what he was doing? No, you know, I cared about the murders. That was my job. We had other guys. We went back 5 years prior to the case, and we put 2 investigators on him and said, find out what you can about this guy and follow him wherever he went. That was all.
Yeah. You have a question, babe?
No, I mean, I just think it's incredible that you were able to get him the way that you did. And also because he was so scary. Honestly, like if anyone was in Los Angeles at that time, this guy was like a demon. Like people were really terrified of him. And I guess once you see him in the room and he's just this little scraggly guy, it like just takes all of that out of you. Like it's just
he wasn't a scraggly guy. He was built. You know, he had that, I guess if you were a man other than me, you know, he had that proverbial V. You know, he was big chested, came down to a really skinny waist. He had long arms and big hands. And so he wasn't, you know, scrawny. I remember attending a briefing on my department. I happened to be at one of the substations, and I listened to some sergeant telling the troops out there that the guy's a coward, he's weak. You know, and I'm sitting there saying, God, I don't know where they're getting their information. No, he's not a coward. No, he's not weak. He's dangerous. Matter of fact, to be honest with you, they wanted to put Sheriff's Department surveillance team around the bus depot. And I'd been talking to some of the guys that were going to be working part of that surveillance team, and they're talking, man, I just hope I get a shot at him. I just want to kick his ass. I want to put hands on him. Mm-hmm. And I told my partner, I said, we can't put our guys in there. This guy, he'll rip them apart. He'll kill them. We need to put, and I don't want to, LAPD had a good, their SIS team, and they were known for not messing around. You fart, flinch, or burp, and they're gonna shoot you. And so I said, that's what we need in there. I had mixed emotions whether I wanted him dead or I wanted him alive because I wanted to talk to him.
Yeah,
but he was dangerous. I saw what he did ruthlessly without any emotions. He was bad dude.
That's the scary part. Like there's no feeling there. Like every time Laura meets with these people and comes out and we talk to them, and it's just like, because we met, you know, Gary Ridgway, he was also like a monster, you know, with this media visual of him, people living in terror of what he was doing. And then you meet him in person and it's like, that's not what you think. But it sounds to me like the Ramirez is exactly what I thought. He was like the scariest person ever. So I mean, honestly, so terrifying. And for me, it's just like, why did he do these things? And I guess there is no why. He was just a bad dude.
Sexually motivated bad dude.
Yeah.
And he said those that acquiesced to his command survived, and those that didn't died. You know, so you do what he says and you live. That's why when all these experts come on and start telling you, you have experts come on and say, hey, if you're attacked, you got to put up a fight and struggle and show them. And then you got other guys say, just go passively. Well, that's what Richard was doing. You know, if you put up a struggle, you're going to lose, and he's going to kill you. And if you didn't, you survived.
That's a tough decision to make.
Sure.
You know, I mean, I think it all depends what kind of person you are, you know.
I was wearing a wig at night, and I was ready to give it up. I wasn't going to put up a struggle.
So obviously he evaded the death penalty because of, you know, the way California is, and he ended up dying in 2013 inside prison. What did he end up dying of?
He had cancer. He had hepatitis. He had a bunch of stuff going on with him. And then they're telling me he was looking really, really ugly. He looked almost green. He was decomposing. Nothing was functioning. He didn't want to be treated for the cancer, and he passed away.
Yeah. That's well, maybe it's better than the death penalty. Let him rot away like that.
Sure, and it takes care of all the appeals.
Yep.
All done with.
Yeah.
So, Maria's mother, when you actually were able to catch him, did you talk to her? Like, I can only imagine. This poor woman.
You know, I never talked to her again with any length of time or anything specifically. Maybe once after the initial contact with her, and there was no reason to talk to her anymore. Maria Hernandez didn't want to be. She just wanted to get this trial over with. We even asked her to go back because San Francisco wanted us to want to use all of our surviving victims and witnesses down here. They had a DA up there. I want to say his name was Arlo Smith, and he was running for re-election. And they were saying the biggest thing against him was he was soft on crime. So now what he was using, he wanted to use multiple murders. So that means bringing all of our surviving victims and witnesses, essentially putting on the trial up there again. So he could add these murders to the one murder that he had filed over there, making it another death penalty case. And I was dead set against it. Went to the sheriff, got an attorney to represent us, what they were demanding of us. And the reason being, by the time they got our witnesses up there, it would have been at least 10 years after the fact.
Yeah.
If they started changing their stories, it could have affected an appeal on our side. So I asked Maria if she'd be willing to make a statement, and she didn't even want to do that. I mean, she wasn't an evil person. She wasn't a mean person. It was just, I just want to put it all behind me.
Of course.
Yeah, it's so traumatizing.
It's re-victimizing themselves. I can't even imagine how terrifying.
So she didn't want to help us out. We ended up doing it a different way. We got the defense team up there to agree that he would waive time. And if he won his appeals down here, they would file their case immediately. And if he didn't win his appeals, well, then there was no reason for them to put him through trial again. He's already been convicted of all these murders.
How many survivor victims were there?
Oh, Maria Hernandez, Mrs. Doy, the Petersons were both surviving victims. That's 4. The kids all survived except for one that was discovered after his conviction in 2010. A San Francisco 10-year-old girl was, that's the only one of them he killed. So there had to be about 5 kids that survived.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah, so and Sophie Dickman. She was a spry 65-year-old lady, tough as nails. She had worked at the county hospital in a psychiatric ward. She worked the emergency room, and then she went to the psychiatric ward, and she was a tough old lady.
Yeah, so she saw her share of crazy.
She sure did.
That's crazy. So when did you first lay eyes on him after he was arrested? And then what was that like? Kind of take us through there. Paint us a picture.
The morning of his arrest was the first time I spoke with him. So we walked in, he knew who I was, and he knew who Frank was. And he had been following us in the news, just like we anticipated. We thought he'd be following us. And that was the first time we spoke with him. And that first interview, I did most of the talking because I could relate to him where he was from, being Hispanic and from the streets, and I spoke the language, and so he wasn't my buddy, but we got along. It was a working relationship. Then we went back to visit him one more time after that initial arrest. Uh, they called up and wanted us to. We got word he wanted to talk to us. We went back to visit him in the jail, and he talked to us. Then before Gil Garcetti became the DA, he was the number 2 guy. He wanted to chew us out, and I said he sent word. He ordered us to go into his office, and I went to my captain and said he can kiss my pooter. I don't work for him.
Why did he want to chew you out?
Because we went and talked to Richard without notifying the prosecution that we were going to talk. Richard called us up, so we went. We hadn't violated anything. He was more concerned that we were circumventing the system, and the defense team. He had invoked his rights, so we didn't call the defense team over any attorneys. And so my captain, I told our captain, I said, I'm not going over there. I don't work for him. He ain't going to tell me what to do. And he says, come on, we'll go. I'll go with you. And so Frank and I went with our captain, who was a big burly guy himself. And we walked into Garcetti's office. He says, okay, before we start talking to my boys, get this straight. Everything they've done with my permission. And they went over there, and I knew about it. And let him know, hey, you don't tell us what to do. And so he immediately calmed down a little bit because he wasn't dealing with just a couple of investigators. Now he's dealing with a manager from the department. And when he did that, he just made us agree that if we wanted to talk to him again, we'd have to notify the defense team. So we noted.
But then you said he invoked his rights, though. He didn't.
Yes.
He's waived his attorney rights.
Well, he hadn't. He invoked them. The very first day we talked to him, he said he wanted an attorney.
Oh, okay.
And so when he called us up, we went back to talk to him again, and he said this time we called the defense attorney, and Alan Adashek was his public defender. And so he went down there and he said, I'm sorry, fellas, let me go see what he has to say. And he spent about 45 minutes to an hour in there with him. And he came back out and he says, okay, he doesn't want to talk to you today, but if he called you back, don't worry about calling me back again. You have my permission. Go ahead and talk to him.
Wow.
And he just pissed Alan off. I don't know what he was saying, but he did that. But we never talked to him again. I talked to him. The news media made a big deal about we went to court. He walked into court and he saw me. And first thing he did was nod his head and said, Órale, Carrillo, which is just another way of saying what's happening, what's going on. And they thought, oh, was that devil talk? Was that a death threat? And
no, that was Spanish.
Yeah, just made a big deal out of nothing. And I talked to him then, short time, and then after the case was over, we went and watched. There was a made-for-television Sunday night at the movies. There was a movie made on it, and he was not allowed to watch it. And so we got a video copy of it. We went and they pulled him out of his cell. We're going to watch it with him. So we did. We watched it. And that was the last time I talked to him.
What was that like? I can't imagine.
Wow. What did he say?
He said that gave kudos to the guy that played him. He says, I didn't think they'd find somebody that evil. He says he did a pretty good job. And the movie to him was just entertaining.
Mm.
Well, he's got a huge ego, so I'm sure he loved it.
Sure. Yeah.
He's kind of just marked his place in time.
Did he ever? I mean, he just never said anything about why he did these things. Or, I mean, obviously that wasn't your motive for what happened, but he never just said, this is why I did this.
No. He asked me, why do you think I did this? He just did it.
Yeah.
That's the scariest part.
Well, when you're in the business, it's not scary. Everything is real. And when you go back to the very basic, all he is human.
Exactly.
And so that's it. Now, I will tell you, and I've said this publicly before, I was playing the very first day we were talking to him, and I was carrying on the conversation with him. I was playing with his anxiety level. I raised it up, I'd bring it down. I wanted to see where I could go, what kind of questions, and where I could feel safe without losing him. And at one point in time, I'm talking to him about his sister and the relationship between his sister and his father. And Richard had his head down on the table, and his arms were like this on top of the table, and his head was sideways, and he started breathing heavy, almost to the point of hyperventilation. And I got him going, and he starts going, and his hands started coming up off the table. And for a millisecond, I became concerned, because all I thought of is, if this son of a bitch starts floating around this room, if he starts levitating, I'm out of here. I can fight somebody normally, but I'm not going to be fighting somebody that's floating around the room. And then I realized, no, he's human, Gil, relax. And I said, okay, Rich. And at this time, my partner Salerno was kneeing me underneath the table, is smacking my leg. Now, I don't know if Salerno's telling me, hey, you got him, keep going, he's ready to give it up, because I really thought he was ready to give it up. And he said, or is he telling me back off? I didn't know. If he's telling me to back off and I don't, well, he's going to have my booty when I get out of this room. He's going to be upset. If he's telling me to keep going and I back off, I wasn't concerned, because I could take him back up. I felt I was in control of him. And I said, Rich, tell you what, you want to take a break? You hungry? You want something to eat? And he said, yes. I said, okay, why don't we take a break? I'll get you some food. So we stepped out of the room and left him in there, sent out for some food for him. And Frank said, God, you had him going. Why'd you stop? He was going to roll. And I said, Frank, we never talked about this banging of the leg underneath the table meant. I didn't want to piss you off. And I felt confident. Well, we came back after eating. He was tired. We really didn't talk that much anymore that day.
Wow. So there was a moment there you felt something supernatural was going to happen.
Well, I'm telling you, it was less than a second. It was there. I said, holy Jesus. I became concerned a little bit.
Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird when you get to, like, I had the, I got to interview, very short interview, but I got to interview Charles Manson when he was up in Corcoran, like in 1999. And I interviewed him through his like glass window in the shoe up there. And I had that same kind of feeling, because at first he was like very fluid with his speech. And then he went from 0 to crazy in like 10 seconds. And it did seem like he was possessed, and it was an outer body experience. And I thought I was seeing something that was truly, truly evil taking over him. And so I get that, with a lot of this stuff. So it takes you off guard, because it's like, it's inhuman.
I got to spend, I don't know if I got to spend, when Charles Manson was subpoenaed. The big deal down south, whenever they wanted to get an inmate down to talk to him or pass words on, if I'm the defendant on a case, I tell my lawyer, subpoena Charles Manson, subpoena this guy to come by. They use them as character witnesses. And all it meant was they'd bring them down from the joint, house them together down here in LA County.
Yep.
So when I was a young rookie cop working Hall of Justice jail, Charles was brought down as a character witness. And my job that night, I was prowler relief. I was just relieving the guy that was watching him, because they had a deputy station right outside his cell. And so I'm watching him, and then he just tells me, he says, hey, do you mind? I'm going to go ahead and jack off. And I said, no, go ahead. Do it. If that makes you feel good. He says, you going to sit there and watch me? I said, yeah. And he said, really? And I said, yeah, really. Go for it. Do it. But he didn't. I don't know if he was looking to, see what I was going to do, what I was really going to do. I'm glad he didn't do it because I don't know what I'd have done. I'd have hoped for the guy to come back from his lunch real quick. Just get me out of there.
Where was that? Was that in CJ?
No, they housed him at the Hall of Justice, the oldest jail in town,
Got it.
right across the street from the criminal courts building.
Got it. That's crazy. That's crazy. Well, listen, Gil, we really appreciate all the time you've given us. I mean, I'd love to talk to you again. I'd love to have you on the podcast again and talk to you about, I think, because we're always going back to law enforcement individuals like yourself, retired, who have stellar careers. And, we actually, believe it or not, we get called to kind of look into some cold cases around the country. We're actually working on a couple of them right now in Oklahoma that are pretty high profile, but we'd love to give you a perspective on some of this stuff if you wouldn't mind.
I don't mind at all. I'm flattered that you'd think about contacting me again. It means that something went right, and I look forward to it.
That's fantastic.
Thank you so much. And next time we'll have Laura.
Yeah, we'll have Laura on this time.
Yeah,
obviously something went wrong.
Something's off today. But thank you again. It was lovely to speak with you. And thank you for catching the scariest person.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Thank you. All right, stay. I'm going to end. Go ahead.
I told my daughter, she came back just last week. She had been to some luncheon, and she said, Dad, I just called to say thank you because I was there at this luncheon with a bunch of women, and somehow they brought up about the Night Stalker. And so I didn't know any of them, but then I said, hey, my dad worked on it, and that started conversation. So I just want to say thank you for doing what you did. And I told her, I said, dear, I said, that's fine. I said, but I went back to address the FBI Academy back at Quantico one time. And Frank got up there and he said, thank you all, the FBI, for bringing us out here. It was an honor being out here. And he says, Gil, you have anything to say? I said, yeah. I said, I concur with everything Frank just said, but I got to thank one more person. And I said, that's Richard Ramirez, because had Richard Ramirez not gone on his spree, I'm just another overweight Mexican cop. And I wouldn't be here standing in front of you today. So thank you, Richard, for what you did. Well, and
you're far too humble. I'm sure you have a lot of accolades, and it's guys like you who we want to be on there, and hopefully there's a lot more out there, which I think there are.
Thank you.